Good morning, everybody. Here is our solution to AP Microeconomics Exam 2014, number 1. What you're looking at here is a constant cost monopoly. We know this is a constant cost monopoly because right here we see the MC equals the ATC. Typically, when we draw monopoly, you would draw monopoly with an average total cost curve that is arced like this, with the marginal cost coming through like so. And in this particular problem, they've given you a constant cost monopoly, so we do not have to do that. So what we're going to do is take a look at these questions and see what we can do to answer these. So using the number given in the graph, identify each of the following for the profit maximizing monopolist. So first things first, if we are a profit maximizing monopolist, that means we are producing where MC equals MR. We always refer to this as our North Star because it shows us our way home. The intersect of MC and MR is this spot right there. That means that the quantity produced is 4. That means then that your price is 40. And now, interesting side note, it does say what is our allocatively efficient quantity. The allocatively efficient quantity is, of course, equilibrium. Equilibrium is allocative efficiency, and equilibrium is where your supply equals your demand. Now here's the question for you, where's supply on this graph? Remember what we learned, marginal cost is supply. And so that means that this spot right there is our allocative efficient quantity, and so that answer is 8. All right. Letter B. At the profit maximizing quantity, is this monopolist experiencing economies of scale, and then explique, por favor. Por favor. So let's take a look at letter B then. Now, for the record, we already said this is what we call constant cost monopoly, so I'm going to bring you over to this page and remind of a couple things here. If you take a look at this, what I drew here at the top is a standard average total cost curve. The average total cost looks like so. Here's our marginal cost going up like so. And so marginal cost and then ATC. We know that on the left side of this spot, that the average total cost is decreasing. We call this time period for a business time period of economies of scale. Forgive my handwriting. And then we learned that on the other side, when average total cost is increasing, that we refer to this as diseconomies of scale. And I ran out of space there. And so in the graph that we're looking at, we don't have an arced average total cost curve. Instead, we're looking at an average total cost curve that is flat and constant. That means we are experiencing neither economies of scale nor diseconomies of scale. That means that we are experiencing constant returns of scale because our average total cost is always staying the same. And so your answer then at the profit maximizing quantity is the monopolist experiencing economies of scale? The answer is no, because you'd write this out in a sentence, because the average total cost is staying constant, therefore this firm is experiencing constant returns to scale. Okay, let's go on to letter C. Okay, now assume this monopolist is producing at 10 units. Using the numbers given in the graph, calculate each of the following. Show your work. Okay. So I'm going to erase everything I did on the graph up top. Got to clear some space here so we can take a look at this. And so they're producing at 10 units. That's here. Now that's a problem. We can see immediately that we've got a big problem there. At this spot, then, without doing any math, I'm showing you that our demand is actually, forgive my writing, yet again, the stylus is not cooperating. We can see that our intersect on the quantity line in the demand curve is below that of the ATC. That means, guys, that our price is below our cost. So if price is less than the average total cost, we know immediately this firm is taking a loss. And so this firm is not making a profit, this firm is taking a loss. And so to calculate profit, remember the rules here, profit equals total revenue minus total cost. And so we have to calculate all that stuff. And total revenue, of course, is price times quantity, minus, in this case, it'd be average total cost times quantity. And so let's go look at what those numbers are, price and quantity. So our price is 10 and our quantity is 10, and then our cost is 20. So the price of 10 and the quantity of 10 minus the cost of 20 times 10, so that's 100 minus 200. That means we've got a loss of $100. So your answer for this question right there is negative 100. The consumer surplus, taking a quick look at this, is going to be it's the difference, of course, between what we pay and what we were willing to pay. And so looking at the graph then, the consumer surplus is going to be everything that's this whole huge area there. And that's a triangle. And so 1/2 of base times height. So the base here, we're going to call this segment, that base is 10. So that's 1/2 of 10 times a height of 50, it looks like. The height goes from 10 to 60, so 10 to 60, that is a difference of 50. So that means your answer here is supposed to be $250. That's your answer to C2. And so C2, when we're 1/2 of base times height, we said that was 1/2 of 50 times 10, so that's 1/2 of 500, and of course that equals 250. And so that's your answer to B2. And alright, let's finish this problem. Then it says, what is the deadweight loss? Well, deadweight loss, this is a weird question. Deadweight loss is a market failure. And so we're supposed to be producing at equilibrium, right? So we're supposed to be producing here. And that means that deadweight loss is going to be this weird area out here. This is a negative because we're overproducing. And so when you're overproducing, it's still a deadweight loss. That's weird, I know, but it is the case. And so that's a height, that's a triangle again. So that means you have a height of 2 and you have a base of 10. So in looking at then numeral 3, it's again 1/2 of base times height. So that means it was 1/2 of 2 times 10. That's half of 20. That means it equals $10. The deadweight loss there is going to be $10. If you have any questions on that, go ahead and hit me on the discussion board there. That was a weird one. But again, I like this problem because I believe on the AP exam, it's very probable that we're going to be looking at problems like this where we have to interpret and do a lot of math. They're not going to make you draw anything. There's no drawing on the AP exam. That does not mean that you will not need to draw to find solutions. When we are in our Google Meet today, I'll do a perfectly competitive thing that then I'll give you kind of like voice examples of what they'll expect you to be able to say in response to a situation. But you'll still need to draw it because when in doubt, graph it out always works. Okay, finishing this problem then. At what quantity is the demand unit elastic? Okay, and so we have an easy rule here to remember. When our MR equals 0, right there, when MR equals 0, that spot up here is what we call the midpoint of the demand curve. That is where the demand curve is unit elastic. So the answer to the question is 6. If it would have said something about inelastic or elastic, then everything to the right with an I, everything to the right with an I is inelastic, whereas everything to the left with an E is elastic. That's just something I always try to make you guys remember. So again, the demand curve is unit elastic right there at the midpoint, which is directly above. It's the point on the demand curve that is directly above the point where MR equals 0. If it said explain, you'd say that is the point on the demand curve that is directly above where MR equals 0. That would be a suitable answer. And finally, suppose that the monopolist is a perfect price discriminator and chooses the quantity that maximizes profit. Okay, that's easy. Let me get this back to where we need to be. I'm going to erase everything yet again. And so in this instance, then, if a monopolist is a perfect price discriminator, that means they're going to take every bit of the consumer surplus for themselves, and they are going to produce at equilibrium. And so without further ado, they're going to go all the way to equilibrium. They're going to produce right there, so there's our quantity. But since they're price discriminating, what that means is they're going to charge every individual consumer the price at which that they can pay. meaning then that the entire triangle now becomes profit for the price discriminating monopolist. Now, for the record, price discrimination is illegal in the United States. There are examples that you are allowed to do, for example, charging the elderly less for coffee or for movies, because you're not targeting an individual. In that case, you're targeting a group. Anyway, that area in red is your monopolist profit for the price discriminating monopolist, and a price discriminating monopolist will produce at equilibrium, but they'll get to have all that area of profit. So this is a triangle yet again, 1/2 of base times height. So we have a height of 40, because 20 is 60. We have a base of 8, so 40 times 8 is 320 divided by 2 is 160. Your answer is going to be 160. Again, this is a triangle, 1/2 of base times height. And that was a 40 times an 8, and that's a half, of course. That's 320 divided by 2 equals 160. Okay, and then the last question here, I've got to pull this up so I can read it. It says calculate the consumer surplus. Well, that's easy. The consumer surplus is going to be 0. The consumer surplus always equals 0 in the case of a price discriminating monopolist, because the price discriminating monopolist gains every dollar for themselves. There is no consumer surplus. Everybody is forced to pay the maximum that they're willing to pay. Remember, the definition of consumer surplus is the difference between what I was willing to pay and what I actually paid. In this case, I'm forced to pay what I'm willing to pay. That means there is no consumer surplus. There is no bonus savings for me. All right. I hope that helped. Sorry I didn't get this thing posted sooner. If you guys have any questions, hit me.